that you have this microphone. So this morning I thought, we're talking about this text, but we're also talking about Epiphany, which is where we find delight, wonder, awe, the divine. For me that can be so many things and how we understand, but I think at the essence of what it is choosing life, which is why I love this text, because this is, again, the prophetic voice speaking to the people of Israel, the ancient text, speaking to the people of Israel. What's important is this idea of what brings life to life, what brings death to life, essentially, what shuts down life. And so this text is reminding the people of Israel that at least in that ancient 2,500-year-old way of understanding, following God meant choosing life, following God's commandments, which the primary one, of course, was to love your neighbor as yourself. And the second one was the prophet Micah, which was what does God require but justice, mercy, and humility. And so this morning I wanted to think through this idea. The story of Jesus, of course, is a great illustration of just doing that, right? Choosing life over law, when the law has become death, essentially. People would starve because you're not supposed to be working on a Sabbath. So choosing life over death meant going wherever you needed to go to find food and to feed hungry mouths. There's an element of both generosity in that as well as abundance when you realize it's about choosing life. But mindfulness, to me, is also about tapping into abundance in very interesting ways. And so when I started thinking about how we tap into this awe and wonder, I naturally started thinking of Cynthia Powell. Some of you know Cynthia. Cynthia's been active in this church and with the 1111 community over the years. Online for a long time, because you were living up in Washington, D.C. area, right, and now living here in the Fort Worth area. Yes. Cynthia was trained and has her master's in health and education from the George Washington University, has done extra studies in mindfulness as well as in health and health-related topics, health studies and health coaching with Harvard Medical School. And then she's also done extensive training just in mindfulness itself, and now is an assistant professor at the University of Texas Health Science.
University of North Texas.
What should I say?
University of Texas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a little different.
Just a little bit of it's in the blood. University of North Texas Health Science Center. Yeah, so, yeah, thank you. So she's with us today, and I am so grateful to have you with us. And you know what? I want to switch. I want you to sit over here, because I forgot the camera over here gets to look at you instead of me. And so that way, that's much better. All right. So, Cynthia, just for a moment, if you just kind of tell us briefly how you would define mindfulness, sure, and then kind of how you got into this. Absolutely. Why this was important to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Is this on? Hello.
It will be on in just a second.
There Testing.
Yeah. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tom. And just a note, I did not come up with mindfulness expert. That was Tom. I tend to think of myself as certainly a mindfulness practitioner and a teacher, and I'm thrilled to be in this area, and I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. So mindfulness, as defined by John Kabat-Zinn, is the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose to the present moment and non-judgmentally. Another way of viewing this is paying attention to our thoughts, our feelings, our bodily sensations, as well as the environment around us without harmful judgment, and also adding a sense of curiosity and compassion. Mindfulness is also a form of meditation, and meditation is a mind and body practice that has a long history of use for increasing calmness and physical relaxation, for improving psychological balance, for coping with illness, as well as enhancing overall health and well-being.
So when you said non-judgmental,
yes,
open that up a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think it's normal for us as human beings to. I was just talking with someone, in fact, in here who we're in another conversation about shame.
Yes.
Brene Brown being one of the experts that comes to mind now.
One of my favorites.
How shamed our culture is,
yes,
and how much hidden that shame is, because and how does it become evident when we experience these kinds of shame or fear? It becomes evident in anger.
Yes.
And just sort of this vitriolic stuff. So non-judgmental, what is that about?
Well, when I say non-judgmental, it doesn't mean not having any form of judgment. It means really not having a harmful form of judgment. So when we're talking about having shame, when we experience that, it shuts down our ability to learn. and our ability to grow. So when we're being judgmental, we're having a sense of awareness. It really involves being open-minded, and it involves 3 areas of intention, attention, and attitude. And that's something that we choose.
So we choose to be intentional about this process.
Yes.
And paying attention. Okay, so I spent a month, this last month, unbeknownst to you all, but online with a Zen center, and I was doing, it was a Zen retreat, week-long retreat, and I was doing meditation, and of course in the Zen traditional sense, they're doing meditation 3 or 4 times a day, 30 minutes at a sitting, and there's all sorts of other stuff involved, and I basically, I thought at a great success I achieved once a day, and at some points only like 5 minutes out of the 30 minutes. One of the things I found most difficult was the idea of paying attention and not allowing myself to get overwhelmed. I found that really challenging, not to get overwhelmed. How does that work?
Well, another way that I look at mindfulness is we're intentionally paying attention with kind awareness. So it's very important to be kind and compassionate to ourselves all the time. However, certainly when we are engaging in a mindfulness practice. So oftentimes when I talk to someone who is new to mindfulness, there's a sense of frustration, the fact that my mind just keeps on wandering and I can't get it to stop, and I'm just constantly thinking, and shouldn't it mean that I just clear my mind and I only think about positive things and I'm in a state of bliss? And that's not necessarily mindfulness. Mindfulness, meditation, is being present in the moment and being aware of what's happening in the moment. And as such, you can give a more wise response to it rather than like a stress reactivity type of response. So even if our mind wanders 100 times, which our minds inevitably do, that's the nature of our minds, gently bringing it back to the present moment, gently bringing it back to our focus or our anchor, which might be our breath or bodily sensations or the environment around us, is actually still in the act of mindfulness. You're still being mindful. But being kind to ourselves is so much more important than being critical, because when we have that critical mindset and we're filled with a sense of shame, again, it shuts down any ability to learn and grow. And what we want is to tap into that ability to learn and grow. And that involves kindness and compassion.
So when you're talking about being kind to ourselves, one of the things that I'm aware of in my own life is how difficult that is. It seems arrogant. It seems egotistical on the one hand. It seems like it's me, me, me. I'm thinking about being nice to myself, liking myself, etc. And I also am rarely aware, increasingly more so, but it always found it difficult to be aware of how much judgment and criticism is going on internally. Anne Lamott has this great phrase that I've always quoted, I love, which says, I try not to get in my mind too much. It's a bad neighborhood. You know, I love that phrase.
Yes.
So mindfulness, in a way, is it a way of sort of welcoming the neighborhood and just acknowledging they're there, but not taking them too seriously? I mean,
yes.
How does that work?
Mindfulness is a way of finding our own way. And tuning into ourselves and being open, authentic, caring. So sometimes when people hear the term compassion or self-compassion, you might think, okay, that's selfish, or it's soft, or I'm going to lack some motivation, by self-compassion. But really, compassion or self-compassion is caring for yourself as you would care for somebody else that you truly love, that you want to support. And it's so incredibly important that we have that attitude and that awareness, not only when we're practicing mindfulness, however, really throughout our lives, because we want to treat our lives as if they're meaningful, and they are.
So I want to come back to self-compassion.
Sure.
And how that translates in this time that we're at, so don't let me forget that. But also, what was it that drew you to mindfulness?
It's a good question. My experience with mindfulness, meditation, stress management, self-care, resilience, all of that was rather limited before 2012. The experience I had before that was through the graduate programs I was a part of and the coaching programs and the yoga classes that I enjoyed. And I certainly knew that there was value. However, I didn't have a daily practice. My life changed dramatically in 2012. One of the main reasons is that my mother was a multivisceral transplant recipient, meaning she had 5 organs transplanted at the same time. And she was with us for a handful of years before she developed an infection in her intestines. She was airlifted from Georgia to Pennsylvania. She spent nearly a year in and out of the TICU, the transplant ICU, before she died. I was incredibly close to my mother, and to see her suffer to the extent that she did and being with her when she died was traumatic for me. I had experienced loss before, certainly, but never to that magnitude, and I didn't have the skills to cope. So shortly thereafter, I started experiencing panic attacks. I knew what they were because of the field that I'm in, but I had never experienced them, and at times they were so intense, my entire body would just shake. And it was frustrating, it was scary. I had to take time off of work. I thought something was neurologically wrong with me. So I went to see a new primary care physician, and he prescribed anti-anxiety meds, and that helped with the symptoms. However, it didn't get to the root cause. And if anybody would have asked me at that point, what do you want? I would say, I want to feel a sense of peace. I want to feel healthy. I want to feel a sense of joy again. All of that was missing. To add to that, the following year, I went through a separation and divorce. So to say that it was a stressful time would be putting it pretty lightly. Thankfully, I was working with a coach and counselor at the time who encouraged me to look into integrative ways of caring for myself. So I looked into a wide range of things, mindfulness and meditation and resilience and self-care being among that. And I cannot say that it was overnight, that it was a change. It was a transition. Mindfulness is a practice, not necessarily a concept. So I started off slowly, and my practice started to build, and I can honestly say that it's been transformational for me. It's changed the way I show up in my relationships, including my relationship with myself. And it's hard for me to imagine my life without it. So I'm not trying to present it as a cure-all. It's a very important part of my life as in self-care, but it also, for me, makes life just much more alive and rich by being centered and connected and aligned spiritually. This definitely has impacted my spiritual life.
So how does this kind of tie in with how you understand your spirituality? Because I drill it in from week to week about this idea of having a spiritual practice, having some kind of a regular spiritual practice. We talk about different ways of doing that, but what does that look like then for you? How does it tap into your sense of spirituality, and how does it look on a daily basis?
Well, my view of spirituality is having a belief in something bigger than myself. And it also involves relationships and values and life purpose. So when I feel centered and connected and present, then I'm in such a better position to tap into what's truly important to me and what I feel that my calling is. So I have a practice every morning, a formal practice, typically seated meditation. Sometimes it's guided, sometimes it's silent. I also journal during that time, and I pray during that time. So that's a sacred time for me that I can't imagine my life without. But there are also things I refer to as mindful moments. We can be mindful at any moment, with anyone, at any time, and anywhere. And I think that's one of the misconceptions about mindfulness and meditation. Oh, I've got to be sitting on the floor, in a cross-legged position for long periods of time.
We're in a conflicted, tense relationship or in a tense moment, conflict moment.
Yes.
And we go, wait a minute, I need to sit down and take some deep breaths for about 5 minutes, and then I'll be back with you.
Right, so that may not work as well. But what you can do, it just takes a moment. You just take a breath. Just our breath. Our mind, body, and breath are intimately connected. So just by taking a few deep breaths in a very stressful moment can help to reduce the cortisol, can help to reduce the stress level. And then you're moving away from a stress reaction to more of a stress response, which really you're tapping into ability to respond in a way that is wise versus automatic or reactionary.
Do you find yourself doing that much during the day?
I do. One example I recently had, I can share with you that I got an email from a colleague, and she had mentioned, where is this? What's your plan? It was a lot of questions. And my initial response was, whoa. and I felt almost, attacked in a way. And if I would have responded or reacted in that moment and responded to that colleague, that probably wouldn't have gone very well because of the state of mind that I was in. However, in large part because I have this ongoing practice, and that's what it is. You never perfect it. It's a practice. I took a pause, I took a few breaths, and I realized that this person is not attacking me. This person is asking legitimate questions. I'm the one who's reading it in this way. So after taking a few breaths, I was able to respond in a much more effective way. But again, it's the pause. There's power in the pause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to take a few minutes because we have just a few minutes here, and
Sure.
I want to take a few minutes. If you would, can you guide us in a quick little mindful exercise?
I'd be happy to.
And then we'll close. And then we'll finish it up.
Sure.
And invite the band up here in just a second.
Okay. So I would just invite you to be in a comfortable position. And perhaps placing your feet on the floor if that feels comfortable. And resting your hands wherever they're comfortable in your lap or on the sides of your body. And the invitation is to close your eyes or gently lower your gaze. And then just taking a few moments to tune in the sensations of breath within your body. And not thinking about the breath, tuning into the sensations of breath. You may feel more in the abdomen, or the chest, or the throat, or the nostrils. Just letting your face relax, shoulders relax. Tuning into your body. And perhaps setting an intention. Something that resonates with you for time during the service, or this day, or this week. I invite you to take a few deep breaths. And whenever you're ready, gently opening your eyes.
So just taking a minute or 2 minutes brings about this sense of being a part of, it takes away the stress and the sort of Rumi would say, what was it Rumi would say is seek not for love, but seek for all the barriers that we put in front of us to prevent us from experiencing love. It's sort of, we wear the stresses of the day, we wear the stresses of our programmed thinking.
Yes.
And so to do this literally allows that to fall away.
So we can be mindful, like I said earlier, anytime, anywhere, any place, and all it takes is a moment. It's moment-to-moment awareness.
Yeah. Back in Easter, I talked about this technique called RISE. I made up this acronym. Instead of reacting, relaxing, and reflecting. Instead of insisting, inquiring. Instead of taking stances, allow space. And then enjoying was actually, the word for enjoy actually means to bring life. Mm-hmm. So it invites life and it invites the participation in life. So, but the reality is that's hard for us to do day to day.
Yes.
Because we're trained to react. Yes. That's just our natural inclination.
Yes.
And so intentionally doing that, relaxing, is one way of breaking that pattern. The other way that's actually much more helpful is daily practicing what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Because our brains don't know how to do that.
Absolutely.
We don't know how to do that physiologically.
It's intentionally paying attention with kind awareness. And even, it doesn't have to be 45 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be half hour a day, it could be 1 minute per day. And I'd encourage, some ways to enter into this if you don't already have a practice. There are, of course, mindfulness apps that are incredibly helpful, like Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer. There's great resources like Harvard or Brown School of Public Health or UCLA Health. I mean, there are countless resources, thankfully, in this space, and thousands of research studies in this area. You can always reach out to me. I would be delighted to talk with you and share additional resources. Cynthia.powell@unthsc.edu.
Cynthia.powell@unthsc.edu.
Yes,
Okay.
or cynthia.a.powell@gmail.com.
Okay, I'm sorry we didn't have that up here on the screen, but if you need to get in touch, you offer classes.
I do. I teach a 8-week MBSR, that's Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction class. That was created by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn at UMass Medical School in 1979. It is the most researched and considered the gold standard of mindfulness training, but I also do like hour-long presentations, and of course I integrate mindfulness into the classes that I teach.
Yeah. I would love for us to offer something like that, so we may be in touch.
Wonderful.
Talking about that more often. I think that's probably one of the most essential things we need in a time where we no longer know how to relate. We only relate out of our anxiety and fear in this culture that we're in right now.
Yes.
And mindfulness seems like an impossibility. But daily practicing it opens that up so much.
Yes. Mindfulness can really help us with our connection with ourselves as well as our connection with others.
Let's thank Cynthia Powell for bringing this to us today. Thank you so much for that. Yeah.